Yeah. And so you have two shame-based people. I think it's about me, and the people that can't make mistakes and can't admit them, because in a shame-based system, as soon as you make a mistake, you deserve to be punished and you deserve to be shamed, which is massive amounts of punishment. And so it's, I don't want to be punished, so I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And so they're all about them, and I'm all about me. And, that's what 30 years of Lazaris will get you. Self-centered, emotionally incompetent people in a narcissistic state. Is that fun? Is that what I signed up with? Let's do this carefully and try and do this perfectly and all this so that, it could end in this way. Of course not. But that's also partly, this lifts some of the taboo. And if you're listening to this and have had similar experiences or are getting value with Lazaris, then you've got hopefully a little humor and an awareness that you're not doing it wrong if you did the 33-second technique and what you visualized didn't occur because you didn't want it in the next 3 days. If that worked, Jach would have done the 33-second technique, a year ago and transformed this dynamic into a healthy, healing, amazing thing. And it would have all, worked out wonderfully for me and for Jach and everyone else. But Jach knows that doesn't work. And so we probably didn't even bother doing it. But there are still people hearing that, the 33-second take is so powerful, it could create problems and stuff. And, that's a little, there's some pain around the gap between, that'd be nice, but here's the reality, and that's a painful reality. So, it didn't feel, when I championed someone, like I championed my wife, and she grew 5,000%. We tracked her different skills in key areas of well-being, and she grew 5,000% over a 3-year period, with her doing most of the work. And that's when kind of savior or championing gets unhealthy. It's when the savior enables the lack of development in the other. And so it depends, what someone is capable of doing. A savior for an infant is absolutely doing everything to keep that infant safe. A savior for a child, a parent for a child, a competent lover, for an infant or child, someone capable of love, is to ensure the survival, security, love and belonging, lack of trauma, etc., and do whatever is necessary as that infant, as that child. As an adolescent, it's about teaching the skills that they can do that for themselves to a point of confidence and where they can demonstrate that. And as an adult, it's loving someone enough to invite them to be independent in meeting their own needs with the skills they're confident of doing. Well, trauma and these types of things, I'm not confident, in this amount of pain with all this experimentation and stuff. So, helpful love is moving this towards confidence. And who knows what all is going on with Barbara and Terry. I just know that I'm not willing to, devote, up to 2 months of my life championing them if some of the core victims of the abuse, and certainly Barbara and Terry did not expect to get fired after 30 years of low-paying work. without, a good retirement plan and stuff like that. I don't think anyone joining a teacher that talks about the elegance of abundance and how it's easier to succeed and you create your own reality thinks that you're going to end up worried about retirement, and risking being on the street because your employer, the channel of Lazaris, couldn't pay you a decent salary or set aside, a 401k investment, and these types of things that actually are part of being an adult, and carrying in a capitalist cult to have the capital needed to have freedom and stuff in retirement and old age. So there's a lot of anger. I get it. But it's also time off of work. For me, it's not particularly fun to deal with people that don't want to take responsibility. And Jach and Concept Synergy and Lazaris do not want to dialogue. They don't want to interview. They don't want to write. They don't want to apologize. They don't want to explore the integrity of the abuse contract. They just don't want to do it. Neither did my parents. Peter Sandhill, my therapist, he didn't want to apologize or, it took him 6 years to refund the money for sexually abusing me that I paid for. This is his big, big, wonderful generosity, right? These things are just sick. They're a sick joke that communicates valuelessness. So, the situation is there. I generally try and kind of navigate through life with the question, what is the most intelligent thing? Now, a video like this may not be particularly fun. It's not particularly fun. There's some fun. There's some humor. There's also some there's some health about going from invisibility to being seen, from keeping the secrets of my abusers to speaking them. So there's some fun and healing there. But it's my body feels exhausted after going into something like this, and it's not entirely safe. It's a in the terms of, like, Lazaris hasn't done a workshop in 40 years on how to deal with this kind of thing. Meaning, if Lazaris knows what he's doing, he knows that all of these types of things are bubbling under the surface throughout, the community. And he knows that people, whether it's me or someone else, doesn't have a terribly competent way of dealing with it. Well, he says he does. He says he has access to the conscious and unconscious mind of every person on the planet. So that, presumably, that means he knows, although he's also done medical misdiagnosis. And so one should question, some of the things Lazaris says, but also consider him, partly within the framework of his own paradigms and words. So Lazaris isn't doing a workshop on this. I think it's a good one. How do you make sense of this, Lazaris? What's other than avoiding it, what's the protocol? Because your model is avoidance. And Jack, Penny, and Michael and the Concept Synergy team copy Lazaris, just like children copy their parents, and avoid this stuff. But it's a little bit schizophrenic and a little bit crazy making if you then do a tape about listening to the whispers and stuff. So anyway, these are some of the layers of complication that a Lazaris friend has to navigate, that someone who just looks at cause and effect and common sense psychology and stuff doesn't have to deal with. They're not saying, how did I create this? They're just like, oh yeah, this person is this person is this. We'll change this variable and it will improve. And I like that approach because it does tend to work more, for certain dynamics. So I haven't pursued the lawsuit as of now. There's a variety of things. I'm looking at what will bring me the overall long-term well-being, which includes what will have overall long-term positive impact on the world. And so, this is a mixed thing. And I notice it looks different from different paradigms because, you could call all of this martyrhood and self-pity. True. You could call it all saviorhood and getting slaughtered. You could say that. It feels more like, healthy dialogue. And I'm not going to do, all of the work. Bill Brown was kind enough to commit $20,000 as a starting fund. I've got money if necessary. But maybe people don't mind signing abuse contracts with Concept Synergy and have no issue about it. I think it's disgusting. It's not something I would ask a client to sign, and I certainly wouldn't put it as a block between someone's spiritual teacher, guru, and their stuff. It's really sick in my opinion. But is it standard American practice to ask clients to sign long, really sick user agreements that most of them don't want to sign and wait, and bother them in the middle of the moment so that they just accept quickly so they can get on with their phone call or accessing their email or whatever it is? Yeah, that's standard practice. Is it friendly? Is it dominion? Is it excellent? No, it's not any of that. Is it a synergy? No, it's pure domination. But this is one of the criticisms I have with the paradigm. Lazaris has said so many things about what's the right way and the wrong way of doing this on thousands of hours that I can look at my own life or Concept Synergy's life or the life of any Lazaris friend and spout out all of the things that are suboptimal according to Lazaris. But I think the healthiest thing is to give a lot of that back to Concept Synergy and Lazaris, beginning with the fact that no one in their right mind looking at data would suggest an intimate friendship with a primary relationship where you tell someone you're the highest being, and you tell them to have their spirituality as their only priority, and then you make yourself their prime vehicle, their platform, so to speak, for all spirituality. Your safe place developed with Lazaris, your higher self met with Lazaris, your unseen friends met with Lazaris. So Lazaris is kind of the jumping off point, like Windows. Lazaris has made kind of themselves a bit of the operating system for metaphysics and spirituality with way more techniques and things that you could possibly do. And then, do that via tape versus, I'm not saying there's an easy answer. I'm just saying that this has some predictable, obvious problems that Lazaris presumably could have solved, since he says he's a we, by just channeling 10,000 Lazarises and doing smaller groups with a lot more dialogue, and having 10,000 people. Although Lazaris said that this is consuming 1% of his attention or energy, something like that. So maybe he doesn't have enough attention and energy for 1,000 channels. I don't know. But, there is a way through some of this, but Lazaris is prioritizing 99% of his attention elsewhere. That also doesn't always work in a good human relationship. If you give your whole heart and soul to one person who's channeling 99% of their energy outside of the relationship to work and affairs and things like that, usually you get hurt. And so, these are things that are worth discussing, but are, taboo to discuss with anyone in the Lazaris community. Anyone outside the Lazaris community says the whole thing is a crock of shit, so why even pay attention? That's not necessarily as useful as looking at the overall impact in different contexts and talking things through. But part of the liability of being in a fringe cult, if I talk to my therapist about this, they turn to their manual and say, yeah, that's shaming and abuse and blah, blah, blah. But they've never met Lazaris, because the highest being to have ever touched the planet is a fringe that nobody who doesn't speak English will even ever meet, right? Because the highest being has to be an American, not a Chinese or whatever, person, and it has to be a white guy, doing. I mean, what do you make of it? And of course, you can't talk about this to a therapist because they don't make anything of it. They never heard of it, right? And so it's just, you're off being a bit crazy, right? And so that's, that compounds one form of loneliness is, being alone in dealing with these things, which is, as far as concept synergy and Lazaris is concerned, you just do that in your journal for 20 years. But I've never liked the Christian God paradigm because, this whole mystery thing of, never, he couldn't pick up a phone and just call you. He's all powerful, but couldn't say anything for 2,000 years. So you're wondering what the real meaning is. Well, there's a lot of that with Lazaris, because Lazaris won't talk to everyone in depth for 3 or 4 hours to work things like this out. Then you talk with a Lazaris friend, they're saying, well, maybe he's doing this because of this. And it's the exact same bullshit. It's like, maybe God has you suffer because that's what you need to grow. It's like, wonderful. Maybe God could pick up the fucking phone and explain it if he's a guy up there doing this. Maybe Lazaris, no, maybe Lazaris needs us to take responsibility for ourselves. And so he could have changed our lives and all that, but he didn't do maybe this, maybe that. It's like, where's the dialogue in 40 years? Where's the workshop where the people do half of the talking, 80% of the talking to make up for lost time, and you gather hand statistics and see what's actually going on in the patterns in the room? Well, Lazaris doesn't feel like doing it that way, and it's Lazaris's show, and you paid to be there with your friend who is going to tell you what they're going to talk about. So, it's so this stuff runs around. In my opinion, it's overall a good idea to put it out there so that you feel less alone, so that I feel less alone, so that, maybe one day Lazaris or someone at Concept Synergy will actually listen to the adult tape, whatever, or the responsibility tape, or the listening to the whispers tape and say, oh, why don't we listen to the whispers? Why don't we look through all those emails we ignored or shamed or canceled or knocked people off the forum for saying anything? Why don't we listen to those whispers and talk with them and be allies? We at Concept Synergy, we have terrible salaries and we don't know what to do with that. We do the room of belief. You're doing that and your parents are still abusing you. Let's bring this up with Lazaris, as opposed to, I'm doing something wrong, I'm going to be punished. Let's pretend it's all wonderful. So I think there's some healthy movement in that, and I think it also coincides with the maturation process of going from a childlike relationship to an adolescent relationship of at least questioning and rebellion. I also have found overall that this is a this is a healthy step in my relationship with Lazaris. And here's what I mean. So even though, concept synergy has cut me off of the streaming because I won't sign that for example, will never use the name Lazaris in writing or otherwise without their written permission. Concept synergy wants to control the free speech of every friend of Lazaris so that they cannot even say Lazaris with that as a trademark name without concept synergy's written consent and all kinds of things. It's a joke. It may not be legal. It'd be interesting, to see, if a company can actually stop you. Like if Amazon wants to stop employees and people complaining about having to piss in a bottle or do this or whatever it is, for minimum wage and all this. If Amazon wants to stop its employees complaining and makes all employees sign a contract never to say the word Amazon without the written permission of Amazon, then that's like concept synergy's NDAs, and that's the totalitarian control and fear pattern that concept synergy is not. I wouldn't say it's making a new map around that. It's copying an old map out of fear and control. But if Lazaris can't even change that in his own company, why would you think you could do it in yours? If Jach can't figure that out in 40 years of Lazaris with a concept synergy that he owns, and you're an employee, you're going to do belief work so that suddenly you live in a dominion company. Well, it's discouraging, of course, and that's where data, so that you don't feel like a fool for this kind of thing, I think is useful. But there are things that that Lazaris does and is that I have not seen anywhere else that I find valuable because it brings well-being. And I sold most of my Lazaris tapes when the streaming thing came out. I had them sitting around for about 10 years because I couldn't figure out how to deal with all this confusion. So I just worked on learning in other areas that were very dimensional and and valuable. But after the sexual abuse with the therapist, I didn't feel good about doing more therapy to heal the sexual abuse from another therapist. It just felt too incompetent, as my experience with therapists, not to mention the fact that none of them had mentioned trauma. I learned that from a stranger in a cafe. And so I still had some of the tapes, and so I'm like listening to the evening and the morning tape. I love it. See, now I feel some shame, because it seems like a real man would have been able to stand up for his rights and not be abused. So there's a little bit of humiliation that I feel around, acknowledging that I work with Lazaris, who, has been a prostitute friend for decades, who's been a big part of these abuse dynamics directly and indirectly, and hasn't been interested in, a dialogue or talked about it. So there's some shame, humiliation around that. So in that sense, part of me doesn't want to acknowledge that, but it's a useful data point to know that when you get everything out of your system that has been repressed in fear and in shame, whether it's your ultimate perspective or not, if you get all of that out, and it's too much to deal, at least for me, with this spiral thinking with Lazaris in a diary, I don't want to have to figure out what a good friend is thinking in my diary. I want to be able to ask a good friend what they're thinking and hear an answer in English, in words. That's not more than I can imagine. That's basic. Now, Lazaris has chosen not to do that, which affects me and it affects everyone else. It's not that personal. I mean, I think Penny had the kind of relationship where she could talk to him all the time, but that did not stop her shame. It did not stop her failures. It did not stop her chronic health issues. It did not stop her early death. And it did not stop her abusing her employees, just like it doesn't stop the average American from doing something very similar. Maybe it made her feel better about it. I don't know. Or maybe it made her feel worse that she is the great Penny, that everyone's wondering why Lazaris picked her. And she hasn't a clue. The survivor guilt type dynamic can be quite difficult. And so it could well be that Penny's life would have been 3 times easier if Jach hadn't come along and she was just a normal gal reading New Age books from time to time. I don't know. I don't know what that probable future would have looked like. I do know that, when I talk about Lazaris in certain settings over my life, I have been isolated for doing so. And so Penny, more so, Jach more so, so that's a pro and a con on a lot of these things. But my feeling is that saying all of this stuff means that I'm not signing the contract of silence and secrecy, that I'm sticking up for myself, and that I'm doing something for other people, because by taking you into this journey here, you have the possibility to iterate it. That's the gift of creating something. It can always be better. But most likely, if you have some competence, you can take what I've just outlined here and you'll refine it. You'll take some of it, you'll reject some of it, you'll add in something new, and what goes forward will be better as a result of you being present for this, if you know what you're doing. That's what you'll do. That's how evolution works. And so this is an accelerant in those areas. And so that's good. And I'm trying to practice advocacy for sanity and doing the right thing so that my little boy can feel safer, that somebody is doing that. Rather than just abusing him and calling it love. That's a worthy focus. And to use Lazaris language, if I'm wrong about any or most of this in the pursuit of what's right, well, you figure that out, working with it. And everything is wrong eventually. Every single belief, every single idea, every single paradigm, every single technique that once helped you eventually stands in your way. And you've got to get rid of it. And so this could also, this is also useful deconstructing a guru, so to speak, because Lazaris says he's not your parent, but he behaves very much like a parent. No feedback, no accountability. We do all the talking. We set the agenda. We name the time and place. You show up and don't. You have to pay us. And we don't apologize even when we misdiagnose your medical disease and stuff. We say how great we are and that our techniques work. And if the relationship doesn't work for you, it's all your fault. That's a shame-based parent. So Lazaris is, saying we're not your parents, we're not your teacher, we're not your guru. We're just going to teach you, behave like a parent, and act like a guru that's unaccountable. And so that's crazy making, of course, and that's how brainwashing works. And so if you're going to deconstruct something like the Lazaris matrix, it's useful to pull, to have the screwdriver, so to speak, to unscrew the system that Lazaris has built up around all these different paradigms that have flaws in them. All systems have flaws in them. But to what extent is the Lazaris system of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being facilitating growth and well-being, and how much is it standing in your way? Because it will do both to some degree. The question is how much, and how to be tracking that, and then how do you unscrew and disassemble a system so that you can do something freer, a little bit more, or unscrew the system so you can do something more confined. Because you can't go from being a couch potato to running 27 miles in a marathon. So to say that's the ultimate thing, do it, is abuse. You have to go from walking outside 300 yards, 600 yards, 900 yards. You have to work up to it. And so you may need to bust the Lazaris system to, learn how to get out of bed and say hello and not feel shame about having chronic fatigue. That may be a much more effective operating system than asking why you're creating your reality. It's like, how do I use that to get out of bed, and so, these tools or technologies have their uses for certain people for a certain period of time in certain areas, and they're dysfunctional. They get in the way. The combine harvester that will allow you to harvest 4,000 acres of wheat faster than 12 people working, by hand threshing, fills up your garage, gets in the way. And so it's a very important conversation with oneself, and to have in the community that the thing that helped you do all of this is now in your way. It's tying up capital. It's dominating the garage so you can't park your car. And what's the relationship there? That's a good thing that a whole workshop should have been done on 20 years ago. How to disassemble the Lazaris material and have a healthy relationship with Lazaris. Abuse patterns that one can have with Lazaris and things. Do a workshop on that and publish that. And then people can dive in and know how to rip it apart and tear it, and come out of it. Because they're all systems of perceiving and creating reality through perception. And what really matters is sustainable well-being. Does this bring you sustainable well-being? Does sitting in a chair listening to Lazaris for 3 days talk about Lemuria bring you more well-being than doing a circle dance? Or anonymous present change, or blind man's buff, or what are the other games that one can do with a group, with a weekend, and a group of hundreds of people? Which are the most fun and which generate the most success? Networking, could be a great fun game for people who are racking up credit card debts, buying crystals that have been marked up 1,000%, right? So that was me. And the back tables promises that this would light up the entire neighborhood and blah, blah. The neighborhood is going downhill. But that doesn't matter because concept synergy sold crystals at 1,000% markup. That was it was a really big profit center. So good for Jach, but just not the employees who don't, those 1,000% markups don't translate into, great salaries for concept synergy, or shame-free environments, or, a nice therapist on hand to deal with your abusive boss. Those things might feel better, but you have to measure happiness. You have to measure success and well-being day by day by day, and see what works. When does Lazaris work? When does this work? When does that work? When does this work? Because if you care about yourself and and others, it's about making conscious incremental progress towards sustainable well-being. So as it stands today, after a video like this, one of the interesting things that I find is I don't feel backlash from Lazaris. If I check in with Lazaris, I don't feel any backlash. Sometimes I'll feel support, and that would be a projected positive parent or a reality experience where Lazaris is saying kind of like, good for you. Like, this is how humans grow. You've got to go through antithesis. You've got to speak up. And our job isn't to teach Jach how to stop abusing his employees and his clients. That's not our job. But you're an abused client, hearing about abuses in the staff, and this is of interest to you. So of course you should bring it up and air it out and do these things. So, so that's certainly beneficial. So how that affects my relationship with Lazaris is I feel closer. Why? Because generally, my sense is, of a good energy around this, number one. Number two, I'm not controlling and blocking things. So it's, it's cleared off a little bit more. And every relationship with everything has a constructive and a destructive potential, including the relationship with Lazaris. So not thinking more, growing more, developing these ideas, like that idea I told you for adult love. I mean, the child's love is I need you. The adolescent's love is I want you. The adult's love is loving enough to care, caring enough to take time, etc. That's a process anyone can do, and you can also use that to look at and say, yeah, you're not actually loving me. You didn't even take the time to see me. Now you're acting to help me based on your projections. It's not love. It has nothing to do with it. You're an annoyance. Recategorize that. This is what love is. I find that useful to challenge false love, that's being used as an irritant, or to also question, am I loving someone? Am I doing all that in such a way that they can survive more? Well, I'm hoping the Concept Synergy staff gets better pay and treatment after these videos. If conscience and character doesn't work for Jach, maybe shame will. I mean, shame is on the evolutionary curve. To treat people better because other people will think badly of you is a low-level psychological response, but it is a very common response, and it works, meaning people get treated better because people are afraid of looking bad. It's not charactered, it's fear-based, but what else is new? I mean, I've been terrified my entire life, as a chronic emotional, energy and body sensation from the trauma and PTSD. That thousands of hours of Lazaris meditations, I don't notice the difference. I feel better at times in a meditation, and that's why I do the morning and the evening meditation. So the relationship is clearer. I can question, is there a better way to do any of this than what I'm doing? Concept Synergy can question, is there a better way they can deal with this other than ignoring it? People always do the best they can. Even if it's fucked up, they do the best they can. Everyone wants to feel better, and they have to balance short and long term and expediency and all that, but everyone wants to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse, and does what has worked the best in the past overall, until they find a better way. And obviously NDAs and shaming employees was the best way for Jach until now. Do these videos alter that? The fact that he understands that if he hurts someone so much that the threat of lawsuit won't stop them from talking, and that an NDA is highly abusive in this context of spiritual family. Will that help Jach grow? Maybe. But people have been putting their heads in the sand for thousands of years over much more obvious things, and so who knows? What will work? But I think some good can come of this, and as I say, my relationship with Lazaris feels less encumbered after a talk like this. And I just utilize the positive parts of the relationship, and have a sense of curiosity, like, what will time bring with this? When I die, will I say, what a crock of shit, or will I say, no, I didn't get that, or I'm glad this worked out because of this, but I didn't see that at the time. I don't know. I think it's ridiculous to try and think I'll know now what I'll know after I die or something. But I can have a curiosity and think that, all of these things are working through. And of all the false beliefs out there, I think that the belief that things want to work out for the best is a good false belief, meaning it's a useful thing to look for how things could be beneficial. And, in that sense, maybe if Concept Synergy and Lazaris were a little bit more mature and competent in the way that would seem ethical to me as an adolescent or my therapist or whatever, then I wouldn't rebel and seek the greater freedom of really challenging, the archetype of the perfect person, which is highly amplified by Lazaris's comments about how great they are. So, we shall see. But that's the update as of August 21, after about a 6-month rest, which I got busy with a lot of work. I'm doing a lot of work with nonprofits. I'm doing work on trauma. I've got a new YouTube channel focusing on 10x living. I'm piecing together, damaged brain, hurting brain, tired, exhausted body, lots going on, and what is the path to sustainable well-being today, as I've been doing for decades. And, at the moment, pursuing Concept Synergy, even with Bill Brown's money, is not as enriching or fun. Like, this video seems a little bit more fun and enriching. So, that's, and there's lots to do. I think the main thing is I've been, I'm looking really deeply at communities and apps that can work and provide more data and healthier living environments. And I'm very excited about that. If anyone's interested in that, look at 10xliving.org and look at the dimensions page. I'm strongly interested in designing pods of human beings where this type of thing would be natural to explore, and in a paradigm where this would be exciting. How exciting to knock a guru off of a pedestal and learn and think more, right? Because whether Lazaris says he's a parent or not, people project parent on him all the time, and it's a default. So it doesn't matter. Lazaris is smart enough to know that it doesn't matter what he says. If he behaves in a certain way and says these other things, people are going to put him on a pedestal. So then there's a disempowering element to that, and so then you have to knock them off the pedestal. And no healthy, secure person, let alone a high deity, will complain about that. So.